in Sydney from €899, or relax on the beaches in Abu Dhabi from €420. Step outside your time zone with the Etihad Global Sale. Book by 13th September at Etihad.com. T's and C's apply. Etihad Airways. Choose well.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Yes, you're very welcome back. We are live with the Sunday Paper Review here on Off the Ball. We're streaming as well across all our social channels, Facebook, Twitter and YouTube as well. Before we get into the headlines as well and speak to our guests Philip Lanigan and Peter O'Reilly this afternoon, we're just going to go across to Croke Park because the full-time whistle has gone in the Liberty Insurance All-Ireland Junior Camogie Final. Maura Trasny-Callig and Niamh Mulcahy are there for us today, and Maura Trasny, I think it's a disappointed Niamh Mulcahy sitting beside you because the full-time whistle is in from Kerry and Limerick in the junior final. Yeah, it's Kerry 11 points, Limerick 8 points is how it finished up, and you're right, Niamh Mulcahy is very disappointed, but I think all that being said, I don't think Niamh couldn't take away from Kerry's story. It's a wonderful story of hurling when you think about it. I was looking here at the team here, Neil, just before we came on air. Every single woman in that panel are from the Clanmorris Parish club, except for Breed Horan. She's from Killard. Everyone else, one club has managed to win the junior title here, and when you consider last year they were in the All-Ireland final against Dublin, they lost and that broke their hearts, and they went back, they learned, they regrouped, and they get their just desserts today. But again, Niamh, like we were saying, disappointing from Limerick, but as you were watching it, you were telling me Limerick need a goal, and that goal just never came and never looked like it was going to come.
Yeah, in fairness to Kerry, you know, that they led from the very start, and Limerick just couldn't get ahead. They never really threatened the goal, and you know the Kerry defence were brilliant, and I think last year's experience of losing really stood to Kerry this year, and you know they weren't conceding a goal at the end. Limerick were camped in their half for a while, but the Kerry defence stood up, and Treacy Diggin in particular was brilliant midfield. You know, she won the player of the match. She's been brilliant for them all year, and look, it's a historic day for Kerry. Disappointing for Limerick, but I don't think anyone would begrudge Kerry that title.
When you say there, when you're giving so much stock to the defensive display of Kerry, would it be too much of a stretch to say that it was the defence that won it for them rather than their attacking?
It probably was. You know, it was a relatively low scoring game, we'll say, and as I said, Limerick piled on the pressure. You know, they needed a goal towards the end. And the Kerry defence just stood up. They were brilliant today.
I'm just looking here now, the intermediate teams are coming out. We have Galway coming out first, obviously I'd be very happy to see them coming out, and Westmeath. Obviously now next year Kerry are going to go into the intermediate championship. Is that going to be a huge leap?
I don't think it will. I think Kerry are a team, you know, that they've worked so hard at trying to win that Premier Junior grade that they'll take great confidence from it. You know, they'll knuckle back in a few months and focus on the intermediate grade, but I think they'll give it a real rattle. And I think down through the years we've seen that, you know, Premier Junior winners and even intermediate winners that jump a grade, you know, they more than compete, and I think Kerry will be no different.
Before I throw back to Neil in studio, I know he's eager to get the paper review underway. This intermediate clash, obviously with the senior clash later, Galway, Limerick, Kilkenny, should I say, we'll be talking about that in depth later. But this intermediate clash, how do you see it going out?
I think it's going to be really tight. You know, they met in the group stage, and it was a really close game, and both won really close semi-finals as well. So I think both teams will be coming in really confident. It's really hard to call. You know, the fact two Galway teams are in the final might give them that bit of an extra lift, but by all accounts Westmeath are also flying it. So to be honest, I'm feeling Galway could shade it, but I think a draw wouldn't be a bad bet on this game.
Well, there you go, Neil. That just goes to show the exciting afternoon of hurling in Camogie we have here this afternoon. We've already seen Kerry pull off history here, finishing up. They were 11 points to Limerick's 8 points. With the intermediate final starting here, throw-ins at 2 o'clock. And then obviously the big one, the senior final at 4:15, Galway against Kilkenny. And of course, we'll be here, myself and Niamh, throughout the afternoon on Off the Ball.
Thanks, MT, and thanks, Niamh, as well. We'll be across to Croke Park throughout the afternoon between now and 7 o'clock as well. As I say, Philip Lanigan of the Irish Daily Mail and Peter O'Reilly of the Sunday Times are here with me in studio. Thanks for coming in, guys, this morning.
No problem, Nick. Cheers, Neil.
Plenty to get through. We'll fly through the headlines. First of all, we'll start on the Sunday Independent. They have a special Camogie wrap around their sports section, so they've 2 front pages we'll go through. Camogie Finals 2019 and a picture of the 6 captains taking part at Croke Park today. 2, of course, from Galway there in the intermediate final, as well as the seniors, the intermediate against Westmeath getting underway at 2 o'clock. Breaking new ground on final day as Kilkenny look to bury pain of defeat. That's after 2 final defeats in a row for Kilkenny against Cork, but 4th final in a row for them. They won it in 2016 as well. On the main sports section of the Sunday Independent, it's Joe Schmidt. There were a couple of farewells yesterday at the Aviva Stadium, both Joe Schmidt and Rory Best. Schmidt's fond farewell, next stop Japan, as Ireland coach goes out on top of the world. Joe Schmidt's final game in charge in Ireland anyway. Between 4 and 7 more games we know anyway is coming up at the World Cup. We'll get into the rugby roundup after the headlines as well. Rob Kearney makes the front page of the sports section in the Sunday Times. One for the road. Ireland fly to Japan, top of the rankings after confidence restored. That's after Ireland's win yesterday. Actually confirmed them as the number 1 team in the world. How relevant that is between now and the end of October, start of November, only time will tell. But Schmidt, we know we're not World Cup favourites. He's trying to put a bit of pressure back on New Zealand. They had a comfortable enough 92-7 win against Tonga the other morning. While over on the side here as well, Walters, why would you listen to Roy? That's after John Walters responded yesterday to the comments Roy Keane made at our Cadbury's Roadshow on Off the Ball on Wednesday night at the Boyd Gosh Energy Theatre, saying why would anyone listen to Roy Keane? He talks a good game, is what Keane said about John Walters. But yeah, John Walters hit back yesterday on Football Focus. We'll be talking about probably the nature of punditry is something that has kind of cropped up in a lot of the papers today as well. Sunday World, best in the world. Ireland head to Japan as number 1 team on planet as skipper bids Aviva farewell. Rory Best there, who got quite emotional actually after the game at the Aviva. His final game of rugby in Ireland as a professional. He's retiring after the World Cup from all forms of the game. There's a very interesting profile of Best as well in the Sunday Business Post, which we'll get to. He's also on the back page of the Irish Mail on Sunday. Best of times, Ireland coach and captain bid farewell to home supporters after win over Wales. But now can they finish with a World Cup flourish? So that's Rory Best and Joe Schmidt there as well. The Sunday Mirror, they're going with Troy Parrott. Earn your Spurs, Troy. McCarthy says Tottenham ace Parrott will play no part for senior Irish team at moment. Troy Parrott, he's actually part of the under-21 squad that flew out to Sweden there yesterday, so he's definitely not going to be a part of Ireland's friendly against Bulgaria this coming Tuesday evening. A lot of changes probably expected for that after the draw against Switzerland the other night. Mick McCarthy also at the top of the Irish Sun sports pages. I won't jump for Troy, same message there from him. Well, top of the world is what the Sun go with, and that picture of Rob Kearney running in their try, and also there on the inside the All Blacks captain Kieran Reid. All Blacks still the team to beat, says Joe. And yeah, that is it on our back pages. Guys, we'll probably start though with what's in the news section of the Sunday Times, because there is another story about developments at the FAI, and Peter, your colleague Mark Tighe has another story. It's getting to the stage, I think we've said it now, where on a Saturday night, I'm spending my Saturday nights just refreshing Mark Tighe's Twitter page and Frank Fitzgibbon, the editor, just to see what is actually on the front page. It's not front page this week, but page 4. FAI staff worked at Delaney's Big 50 party. He has details of how FAI staff were asked to work at John Delaney's 50th birthday party, and some details of, I think it's probably just the extravagance really that we've kind of come to expect now from these stories involving the FAI. We have contacted the FAI for comment this morning, but they are offering no comment at the moment on it. But just some of the details on it. So staff from the Football Association of Ireland worked at John Delaney's lavish James Bond-themed 50th birthday party the Sunday Times has established. Payments connected with October 21st, 2017 bash at the Mount Juliet Golf Club in County Kilkenny are being investigated by the FAI through accountancy firm Mazars. Delaney, the association's executive vice president and former chief executive, has been on gardening leave since April 15th while the investigation continues. Now, there is no suggestion whatsoever that anything essentially wrong has been done here. I mean, it doesn't seem that it was a particular secret at the time. Indeed, it's quoted that John Delaney was quoted at the party and even mentioned in a speech to give his own staff a round of applause for their work. My own staff have been absolutely brilliant, he said. This isn't part of their job to organise 50th birthdays. They won't be doing it again for a while, trust me. So, like, on the face of it at least, guys, it doesn't seem that this was an enormous secret, but as we said, it does just probably point to the kind of the lavish culture that probably had been developing at the FAI?
It is, yeah. And just when you see the line about the birthday party being coordinated by Peter Kelly, better known as Frank, like there seems to be an element, a surreal element to all of these stories.
Yeah, and on that as well, he was contacted by the Sunday Times for comment, but he didn't respond to calls last week as well, it says.
So it's just the fact that it's so out of keeping maybe with what's going on with Irish soccer at the moment and where they need to get to, that all this lavish expense, and again, some of the detail Mark has, where the centrepiece was a large ice sculpture of a Walter PPK pistol surrounded by martini glasses.
I'm going to be honest, it actually sounds like a brilliant party.
It sounds like a great party. And the other line again, this James Bond theme that they had the iconic Bond 007 logo incorporating a pistol was modified to John Delaney 0050. Just brilliant. But I suppose the problem for people is that so much time and energy and expense seem to be going into planning this level of detail, when I think as Paul Rowan has a piece in today's paper about baby grassroots soccer in revolt. So just the juxtaposition of what was happening at the highest levels of the FAI and in John Delaney's life with what maybe needs to happen with Irish soccer.
Is Mark Tye just top boy in the Sunday Times offices at the moment?
Well, you talk about checking your Twitter feed. Can you imagine with the communications department in the FAI? It's the kind of the grisly. The details are what make it so readable and so embarrassing for the FAI. It kind of reminds you, as you were saying off air, Philip. It reminds you of the worst excesses of the Celtic Tiger, except that this was all taking place in a recession and at a time when the grassroots are, the spirits are low there and they have all sorts of issues going on. So it's just one car crash after another for the FAI.
Yeah, it really is. We'll get into the action though from yesterday. We're going to start with the rugby because it's all over the back pages. Peter, you were there at the Aviva Stadium yesterday. In general, it seems like it was, have Ireland kind of turned a little corner here now?
Are
they going around the corner?
It finished well, which is what you'd want heading off to a World Cup. The second half, Ireland started to look like the Ireland we recall from 2018. Physically, they looked sharp, and it was almost as though you could see them developing during the game. Finding their some form during the game, because during the first half it seemed as though Wales had the measure of them. Wales were shutting them down and they looked a bit impotent, but then after the break Ireland just seemed to go up a gear. They didn't give anything away, they didn't show us anything new. They can, I suppose Joe Schmidt can explain that away by saying he doesn't want to show World Cup opponents anything.
But at what stage do you actually have to start showing? Do you have to start, do the players have to start actually trying to do it?
Well, you see,
bring it into the match situation.
Well, the way that Ireland play the game is sort of a fairly limited game plan, which was very successful in 2018, is enough, I think, to beat Scotland in the next game. And this was a dress rehearsal for Scotland in Yokohama. So from that point of view, it was a successful exercise. At some stage, Ireland may be required to produce something a little bit different, to take a few risks. They will know during the tournament who they may play in a quarter-final, and I suppose their preparation can be altered to some degree. Then you can't completely, produce a new game plan mid-World Cup. But yesterday we saw that they can still outmuscle sides like Wales. They can still produce that sort of limited but effective game plan, and they went away feeling better about themselves. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but it was miles away from Twickenham a couple of weeks ago, and just physically they looked up for it. And guys like Conor Murray and Johnny Sexton also looked physically sharp, even though they're relatively short on game time. So
what about the line out though, Peter? Because I know we're talking about Rory Best, who was such a part of the story yesterday, but even like Neil Francis has a good line in his column. Just the 29th minute of yesterday's World Cup game, Ireland eventually won a line-out. The crowd applauded a simple fundamental in the game of rugby. It's like cheering when the bus stops at the bus stop. Because
I've done that a few times, I'll be honest.
But that was because, again, they'd lost the previous 2 line-outs. This was meant to be the wave to the crowd from Rory Best. So is that going to be a big issue?
Yeah, that's an issue. I mean, the phrase "elephant in the room" was kind of lurking in the back of my mind yesterday. The way things were going, they lost their first 2 lineouts, and whether Rory Best was totally to blame for those losses is kind of immaterial. The focus is on him now. He's the leader. James Ryan has been given a new responsibility. Everybody knew that the line-out was under scrutiny going into yesterday. So for the first 2 to be lost looked awful, and it got to the stage where you were thinking, every time the ball goes out of play, the pressure's back on the captain again. So it's going to be a theme. It's going to be, especially if Ireland do end up playing against South Africa in the quarter-final, because South Africa are just populated by monsters. The Peter Steph Tutoy, even Etzebeth, these guys are all 6'7". Franco Mustard also is a great line-out operator. So much of Ireland's game stems from the line-out. It's going to be a talking point, and when Rory Best is front and centre in so many ways, and he was definitely front and centre yesterday, it's negative energy, I would say, from Joe Schmidt's point of view.
But even I know we'll get to the All-Ireland final replay as well. This idea of a captain being under pressure, like Kerry football are one of the last counties to stick with the tradition of
the club nominating.
And obviously if Gavin White was under serious pressure the last day, might lose his place. So I guess that's going to feed into the pre-World Cup. Is Ireland's rugby captain going to be under pressure for his place, and what kind of knock-on effect that could have?
Yeah, well, the cynic in me, I must say now, watching the scenes after the game, which reminded me of the Brian O'Driscoll send-off at the Aviva a couple of years ago, where everything was ready, the blimp came down. There was no blimp yesterday, thankfully. But the Welsh guys hung around afterwards to show their appreciation for Rory and for Joe Schmidt, which was a nice touch. And there were tears from Rory and his kids on the pitch there. It was lovely. And you were thinking, this is the good story, the happy part of the story, but there is this little kind of detail going on in the background it's not going to go away.
And how much of that, there was none of that for show, because we'll get to Roy Keane as well, and there's a great line in David Walsh's piece, I think he was talking about, is it the entertainers of Des O'Connor, and saying, oh yeah, tears are extra. So there was none of that yesterday, I take it.
Well, I think Rory, everybody, we'll talk about Rory Best's personality as drawn out there in the Gary Doyle piece in the Business Post. He's very likeable, and for a guy, there was no questioning the admiration from the crowd at the Aviva, and the joy, I suppose, and obviously he got emotional himself, and it's testament to a guy who's, I suppose, he's never been a superstar, but what he's achieved is remarkable. To play 120 tests, to be Ireland's most successful captain ever, that most people, I think, want it to be a happy ending for him. But Dennis Walsh makes the point in the Sunday Times that this could be as good as it gets for Rory Best.
Yeah, this big farewell isn't the farewell, essentially. It's the farewell on home soil. There's
exactly, and that it's only the likes of maybe O'Driscoll who gets the perfectly scripted farewell. Paul O'Connell, gets carried off on a stretcher. Some people said, "Oh, well, that was the warrior being carried off on his shield," but still it wasn't what he wanted. And very few people do get to go out as they want. If Rory does, well and good, but there's that lurking doubt.
Yeah. On that note, we'll get to that Rory Best piece with Gary Doyle just after we're going to take a quick little break, and after that we'll have that Rory Best profile from Gary Doyle, and also a lot of stuff kind of revolving around a lot of punditry commentary really across various sports, which is quite interesting, and more on the All-Ireland football final replay next week.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball. Join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter.
I hear you some wiring needs a fixing, ma'am. The name's Buzz, on account of my work.
No chance. Not all cowboys ride horses. All Safe Electric registered electrical contractors must give you a certificate of completion that shows their work meets approved standards. Find one nearby on safeelectric.ie.
Whatever job you're on this autumn, we've amazing deals at Screwfix. Get the DeWalt 18-volt XR brushless combi drill at the introductory price of just €176.95, an incredible €110 saving. Or save 40% on the Deep Pro Organizer. Was $29.95, now only $17.95. For more information, visit screwfix.ie. Over 20,000 products at low trade prices. Screwfix, here when you need us. While stocks last, prices valid until 5th of January 2020. Visit screwfix.ie for delivery fee info and T's and C's.
Play it, wear it, live it. Whatever you're looking to buy, why not Flexify it? Choose a payment plan that suits you from a wide range of retailers across Ireland. Buy now and pay later with Flexify.com. Terms and conditions apply. See Flexify.com.
If you've had a mortgage for years, or you're a first-time buyer, why pay more for mortgage protection than you have to? VHI now offer cover from as little as €7.58 per month. It's easy to set up or switch over the phone. Call us on 1890 444444 or search VHI Mortgage Protection. €7.58 per month is based on a 30-year-old non-smoker for a 20-year term and mortgage protection of €158,000, including a 10% customer discount and a 1% insurance levy. Terms and conditions apply. VHI Healthcare DAC, trading as VHI Healthcare, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland and is tied to Zurich Life Assurance plc for VHI Mortgage Protection.
It was the week when Brexit got real. In this week's Sunday Independent, how Brexit will affect your day-to-day life and what it's already doing to house prices. In life, Miriam O'Callaghan on love, always checking where our kids are at night and tiptoeing back to the church. In property, get the latest interiors trends for your home with tricks for any budget. And in sport, we celebrate Camogi's big day with a 4-page special. The Sunday Independent, the complete read.
Free now. Get all the ducks in a row for your business. Disruptors that synergize solutions into actionable actions in a blue sky thinking environment. Ping us and we'll cross-pollinate B2B. Oh, okay, right. We're leaving the business up to them. Whew. Simplify business travel with a Free Now business account. Search Free Now Business to find out how your business could benefit. Cross-pollinate bees. It's nice.
The 2019 Boyle Sports World Grand Prix Darts is back at the City West Convention Centre, Dublin from the 6th to the 12th of October. See 32 of the biggest darting stars on the planet, including world number 1 Michael van Gerwen, former Grand Prix champion Darrell Gurney, plus fan favourite Peter Wright. Get your tickets now at ticketmaster.ie and search darts. The 2019 Boyle Sports World Grand Prix Darts at City West. Game on.
That's the sound of Rebecca banking the money she saved with the Bosch cashback offer at Harvey Norman. For a limited time, Bosch are giving cash back on selected Bosch appliances from Harvey Norman, like the Bosch 9kg iDose washing machine with automatic dosing for €599. Save €200 and claim €35 cashback. Harvey Norman can deliver and install your new appliance and take away the old one. So get perfect wash results and big savings at Harvey Norman.
Go! EirGrid manages and develops the national electricity grid. You could say it's the heartbeat of Ireland, keeping our country's energy flowing from head to toe across the land, so that everyone has power when and where they need it. Because no matter who your electricity supplier is, it's the power of the grid that keeps our farms and businesses running and our homes warm and bright, now and into the future, without missing a beat. EirGrid, the current, the future.
This week at Dunnes Stores, become a connoisseur of French cuisine at our French food and wine event. Try a Parisian-style breakfast with any 4 for €3 on freshly baked pastries. Or host an evening feast with award-winning breads and 3 for €2 on delicious cheeses. And for those perfect French pairings, get 25% back in Value Club points when you buy any 6 bottles of wine. Plus, with our 10/50 grocery voucher, save even more. Dunnes Stores, always better value. See online for terms and conditions. Minimum spend required. Please drink responsibly.
Across Ireland on 106 to 108 FM and at newstalk.com. This is Newstalk.
It's 2 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Adrian Harman. A 26-year-old man's been arrested on suspicion of the murder of Vincent Parsons in Talla in Dublin last month. The 34-year-old from Clondalkin died on August 26th. Josh Crosby reports.
Vincent Parsons had been discovered in the Killinarden estate with serious head injuries. It's believed he had been attacked at a nearby pub. He had been taken to hospital in Talla where he was pronounced dead. It's the second arrest as part of the investigation. A 24-year-old had been released without charge. A 26-year-old man has been taken into custody and detained at Talla Garda Station. Investigations are ongoing.
Senior UK government ministers have rounded on former colleague Amber Rudd after she claimed Boris Johnson is pursuing a no-deal Brexit. The Work and Pensions Secretary says the change of course, along with the sacking of 21 Tory MPs, was behind her decision to quit the party. However, current Chancellor Sajid Javid insists the UK government has ideas to secure a deal. Meanwhile, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says she knew what she was getting herself in for.
When she took the cabinet role, everyone was asked, do you accept and can you sign up to and will you support the Prime Minister's plan to leave by the end of October, preferably with a deal, but if not, come what may. And we all accepted that. And I think the Prime Minister was right to restore some discipline. And I think he's right to expect it from his top team.
A man's been arrested after a bomb was found in County Tyrone. It was discovered in Strabane yesterday and led to a number of homes having to be evacuated as it was dealt with. The suspects being held under the Terrorism Act. A series of peaceful protests by farmers will get underway at supermarkets around the country from this afternoon. Organisers Beef Plan Movement say it's because of retailers' decision not to engage with them. The protests are part of farmers' ongoing row with meat factories over beef prices and comes ahead of tomorrow's second round of talks aimed at resolving the dispute. And electric car sales are set to triple this year compared to 2018, according to the AA. A new survey shows 40% of Irish motorists would support a scrappage scheme to allow from diesel to electric, while more than 33% say it would influence their decision when buying their next car. That's all for now. More in an hour.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA, you can find our lowest car insurance price online, guaranteed.
Dry and bright over the Midlands and east of the country with some sunny spells. Cloudier though with some drizzle in parts of the west. Top temperatures of 15 to 19 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Yes, you're very welcome back to the Sunday Paper Review. Neil Treacy here with you. We are streaming live across all of our social channels on Off the Ball on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. I'm alongside Philip Lanigan of the Irish Daily Mail and of Peter O'Reilly of the Sunday Times. We were talking about the rugby just before the break, and one last piece we wanted to get to on it was there's this really very, very interesting profile of Rory Best in the Sunday Business Post today by Gary Doyle, who would have been on the Sunday Paper Review a couple of months back. But it's just quite a nice profile, I suppose, about where Rory Best has come from and the stage he's at now. The opening paragraph I absolutely love, though. Imagine what it was like to be Rory Best, rugby fanatic, 23 years old, standing on the sideline at Lansdowne Road, hearing the words, "Get stripped, Best, you're going on." Imagine that sense of anticipation and lifetime's hopes and dreams condensed into a few seconds, the knowledge you're about to make your international debut against the All Blacks of all teams. And imagine the embarrassment and dejection when amid the confusion you're told the best the team management had called for was actually your namesake and Ulster teammate, Neil. It was just a lovely way to intro it, I think, and he's saying it's a story Rory Best has kind of died out on over the years.
Yeah, my guess is that Gary Doyle got that yarn from Eddie O'Sullivan, who's one of his main witness, I suppose, in the piece, because Eddie would have been the Ireland coach at that stage. He was the coach of, say, it was about 2005, I think, when he got capped. And Eddie makes the point in the piece that, as I mentioned before the break, that Rory is likeable, has the common touch. I think that's why there was such warmth in the send-off that he got at the stadium yesterday. Mm-hmm. And I find this interesting because the journalist is from the same part of the world. Gary's from the same part of the north as Rory Best. So he has a sort of an insight. Gary's kind of lived half his life in the Republic, but he's from the north. And while Rory is very much a northern Protestant, he's an Irishman. You know, I used to often wonder what it was like for the Ulster players when they came down to the Ireland Carton House to train. And Paddy O'Reilly, the baggage master, used to bring in his mate Christy Moore for some diversion during the week of a game. and sing rebel songs or whatever, folk songs. And I used to wonder what some of the guys from Methody in Campbell College, made of that. But Rory'd be the sort of guy that, as I say, he's an Irishman. When Dennis Leamy was still playing for Ireland, he was always Rory Best's roomie. So you have an ex-hurler from Cashel and a farmer from Portadown, County Down. And I remember also that in 2011 there was a really disappointing quarter-final defeat in the World Cup in Wellington. And that's the moment that I remember some of us in the press pack reckoned that Rory Best was going to be captain one day, because he came into the mix zone afterwards, and whereas some of the players looked a bit dishevelled, they had cans with them, that was the last place they wanted to be. Rory came out, tie, top button done up, and he was obviously very disappointed with what had happened, but he chatted away to us. And Gary goes into a bit of that. He talks about the fact, some of the setbacks, some of the stuff that Rory has had to deal with off the pitch. Turning up at the Belfast rape trial obviously didn't get him much positive publicity. He was perceived that he was supporting the defendants. He also talks about the fact that he's a product of where he comes from, and how people in the local GAA club are as where is it? Tully Lish GAA club.
It's kind of welcoming to him as they are any other member of the community.
Because he was a guest of honour there, and and somebody from the clubs talked about the fact to me. It says it doesn't matter to me if he's Catholic or Protestant. Rory is 100% a gentleman, and they're incredibly proud of him. And so that was interesting. It was interesting.
That's the line that jumped out to me as well, and just Gary, the way he kind of profiles the background, saying he's Protestant, posed for pictures with DUP leader Arlene Foster, and yet, like every other player, no wish standing for Aaron Levine, and then the links with the GA club, how he's seen as one of their own at the time. So he clearly has that everyman quality about him that's made him so popular, and you saw the reaction yesterday. But I thought there was a great line at the end, again, via Eddie O'Sullivan, talking about what's to come and the World Cup, and saying he's not finished. I definitely feel there's one more rodeo left in the guy. Now, to me, a rodeo is not a calm, maybe successful sports event. If that's the way
who knows what's going to happen in Japan.
Cup is going to come. Like if I was Rory Best and someone said it's going to go like a rodeo for you, is he going to be hanging on for dear life? So it was just a very interesting quote, and maybe sets up a lot of the uncertainty to come, that nobody knows how this is going to finish.
Well, temperamentally, he's well equipped. To me, it's down to his own trust in his fingertips. It's that one technical thing that's going to be preying on his mind. But when Ireland beat New Zealand last November, he had a stormer of a game, and Stephen Jones, that great friend to Irish rugby, wrote in the Sunday Times that he said his team obviously play for him, and that's not that's not something that was kind of plucked, just made up. That was an impression that he got. And he does have gravitas. He's very good at dealing with referees, which is a huge part of the captain's job. And he's very obviously a leader, and Schmidt would be reluctant to let that go. So
yeah, just say one thing. Just when I saw the little biography panel and just his age, 37, it jumped out to me again. I was doing a piece yesterday on Stephen Cluxton, who's same age, very different kind of qualities maybe in persona, but here you have two 37-year-olds who are right front and centre as their team talisman going into. Cluxton's on the verge of an unprecedented achievement in Gaelic football. Here's Rory Best leading a team that's ranked number one for the first time. It's incredible, I guess, their legacy to be in that position at their age, and clearly such trusted figures, So it just again jumped out.
Yeah, it's not unprecedented for somebody to go to a World Cup as the captain and the playing captain and end up not playing. In 1987, the first World Cup, Andy Dalton was the All Blacks captain. Sean Fitzpatrick ended up playing in the final against France. If that were to happen, I think it would be disastrous for Best, obviously. And at the moment, there's nobody really putting huge pressure on him. Although it was interesting that when Sean Cronin came off the bench yesterday, Ireland's line-out started being more productive. They were able to throw a little bit more adventurously, and the flight of the ball was sure, because Sean Cronin is somebody whose line-out throwing has been questioned in the past. So I thought it was interesting, and again, Dennis Walsh made the point that when Joe Schmidt went in apparently to bat, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, the news went around that Joe was doing a Tuesday press conference, and this is a break with formality.
Straight after the England game.
Yeah, and so the chat amongst the hacks was he's going into bat for Rory here because Rory's been taking a bit of a kicking over his line-out throwing, but his endorsement of Best wasn't absolute. There's a lovely line actually from Dennis again. I just liked. He said, dropping the captain within weeks of the World Cup would have been a seismic decision to make, but at one press conference Joe Schmidt's expressed support was less than absolute. It was only a tiny gap in the language, but speculation is like dust. It only needs the smallest of openings. So quite cleverly, I think, Schmidt left a bit of pressure on Best, and you saw how he performed in Cardiff in the loose the following week. Yeah. So, maybe it's no harm that nobody feels absolutely secure of their position.
We are pushing the clock a little bit, so I think we're going to move on. I think we'll go from one Irish captain to another former Irish captain. Roy Keane is in various newspapers off the back of the things he has said at our Cadbury's Roadshow on Wednesday night at the Bord Gáis Energy Theatre, where he had a go at, among others, Alex Ferguson, John Walters, Harry Arter, Stephen Ward, to name a few. But there are some interesting reaction pieces, I think, to it. Philip, you had picked out a couple of them when you came in this morning as well. Which one do you want to start with?
Well, maybe Philip Quinn's comment is...
Philip Quinn in your own pair. Yeah, he has a couple of... he's thrown in a couple of little hand grenades in there, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And again, Tommy Conlon has a very good piece we'll get to as well, but just...
The headline for it's all digs and no dugout as Keane's circus act rolls on.
There's just a couple of very interesting lines, and maybe start at the end, but the last line is the killer. McCarthy has been employed as a manager virtually unbroken since 1992, over 972 games. How many players has he publicly fallen out with? One.
Yeah.
So he makes the point.
It's a perfect last paragraph, I think. It's a real...
But you forget, Roy, he's so public and everybody feels they know him and what's going on and see him. But the fact that, again, he points out that when will Roy Keane actually manage again? It's 8 years and 8 months since Keane last named the team, last stood in the technical area, was last the number one. So you kind of forget that, even in the conversation, the roadshow, that he was touting himself, come and get me.
Yeah.
But when Philip points out that it's that long, like for out of management at the highest level, and for someone who said himself that he doesn't expect to jump in with Yeovil, or where he wants to go in right at the top in a team that he might actually like watching. Like it's incredible to see that. So that's one side of it, and I guess then you've the other, maybe Tommy Conlon saying just the fact that how much of an, even though the Keane is an anti-hero, it's an anti-hero often has a longer shelf life with people, and just that how charismatic Keane was.
Yeah, and I think that was a big thing from it, because obviously a lot of people have jumped in on the things he has said where, he was, got a little bit too personal with John Walters and those kind of things. But at the same time, I think all of these articles are making the point that Roy Keane the other night could have said absolutely anything. And people would have been roaring and cheering.
Exactly. But I think if you were to say stop it there and sorry Roy, that's offside, or the lads, you would have had to stop the interview consistently. You would have needed a bleep out, like there would have been no flow. And as Tommy kind of says, Roy, there's no half mast. He couldn't be tamed then, and at 48 there's not much sign of him being tamed now. For over 3 hours most parties showcased the charm and electric intelligence that has often been buried beneath the caricature. And I must say, after watching myself, I read the headlines first and you kind of went, the John Walter stuff, such poor taste. But then in the context of the actual interview, it is very different. He's like playing this pantomime part. He has all the looks, again, the stare. his sense of timing, you couldn't pay a comedian to come across with it. So he seems to be, there was a whole hamming it up and performing for the crowd. Like, it was the greatest performance I've seen the Board Gosh Energy Theatre. And I think the comments were playing to the crowd, playing to his home audience, and knowing that he'd get the reaction he did. I just think if John Walters, if he survived a dressing room environment for that long, and a professional soccer environment no more than anywhere else, could be fairly cutting. I think you'd have to just go, look, that's Roy being Roy.
Yeah, I thought it was fascinating to get two different takes on Keane. There was a line, quite a cutting line in Philip Quinn's piece, where he made Keane sound like sort of a Jake LaMotta towards the end type character. He was saying, he talks about the circus act stuff he's been asked to do on Wednesday, Keane's part, in a hurling skills test on stage with Neville. It was the sort of paddy-wackery nonsense he'd have rubbished as a player, but now he embraces it, which is a fair point. Whereas Tommy, what I liked about Tommy Conlon's piece was that he makes the point that this, at times, this makes him an unpleasant being. Some of the things that he says. Yeah. At the same time,
it's exactly what the crowd are loving about him.
Yeah, but that's true, and I think that the Tommy Conlon piece was almost a kind of a love letter to Keane, to that charisma that we spoke about, his voracious intensity. It was in him before he ever became a pro, and therefore it was still in him after he finished as a pro. So that watchability, it's magnetic, and as you say, that the timing actually is incredible. His sense of timing, his delivery was.
But there's a great line there. He says, and Tommy says, usually there is a black hole where the talent once was for star players. The talent is the charisma, and when the talent disappears, the charisma fades with it. The stardust pales with the star. But obviously, you watch Keane now, and he seems to know exactly and be more sure of himself in a public setting than he ever was. So,
David Walsh, on the other hand, is quite critical of Roy throughout his piece in the back page of the Sunday Times supplement. Just a couple of bits from it. I used to admire Keane. He was the Irishman who didn't accept second best, the kid from Cork who went to England as a nobody and became somebody. Just because you're Irish, he reminded us, you don't have to fail. And then that was a long time ago, before Sunderland, Ipswich Town, Aston Villa, the Republic of Ireland and Nottingham Forest. Let us put this gently. The man who has judged others by the highest standards wouldn't want to look too closely at his own managerial record.
The best line, again, I mentioned already, was to me about the Des O'Connor line, and as David points out, again, tying into the pantomime performance, I saw the narrowing of the eyes the other evening. I thought, as a singer, he was once asked how much it would cost for him to do a cabaret. 3,000, he's reputed to be said. Tears are extra, and that's what I thought watching it. He was doing the stare. It was like, what is it, the blue steel, the look, give us the look. He was going through his full array, almost a vision of himself on the pitch. He'd give you everything he wanted, but it was all almost for show, and that's why, to kind of take huge offence at what he said, if you're still taking offence with Roy at this stage, maybe it's like you haven't seen him before.
Yeah, but there is one even just towards the end as well that David brings up, and he points out, Nathan Murphy, the presenter, asked Keane if during Ferguson's very serious illness last year had he got in touch with his old manager. Keane said he hadn't. For this admission of unwavering enmity, for this refusal to reach out to a man who'd been central to his brilliant career, Keane earned a rapturous ovation from his audience. He sure knows how to play them. Like, it goes back to he could have said anything there the other night.
Ferguson himself, you probably have two of the thickest men in terms of unwavering, that when they have some, with the Rock of Gibraltar thing, there was no backing down there. So do you not look at Keane, is it not more in keeping with the man to actually have that principle that doesn't matter, again, maybe the lack of empathy there, but to actually not back down, stick to my principles, I'm not apologising now. So I would have thought, again, that's more in keeping with him, whether you like him or not, than this actually a tearful phone call to Ferguson saying sorry, or how are you?
It's about 15 years ago, I remember reading a profile of Roy Keane where it emerged that his party piece was positively forthright by Bob Dylan. And this has been brought up loads of times. But I remember thinking, gee, there's more to this guy than meets the eye. The fact that he has that anger in him, and that spite, again, is part of the charisma. The fact that he divides opinion is why he'll continue to
obviously
to attract attention.
Yeah, judging by Gary Neville or his partner in crime, there's still a level of spite out there as well, judging by some of the reaction to the roadshow, but sure, that's probably one for another day.
Yeah, it certainly is. On that kind of nature of, I suppose, the analysis and punditry side, it kind of leads us nicely towards the GA and next weekend's All-Ireland football final replay, because there is a lot of comment. Micheál Clifford in your own paper has written at times very, very funny, but at times quite scathing as well, review of RTE's coverage last week, and it ties in with Joe Brolly's own column today in the Sunday Times, where he has said, look, I got it wrong on David Goff last week, and he goes into detail about how he's phoned David Goff and apologised for the way they handled the red card and the penalty on RTE.
Yeah, I guess before coming to Joe Brolly's own mea culpa, again, that the Micheál Clifford's piece is very good, and like it says, with wisdom and a withering edge under it, and that's kind of what it's about. He goes through the kind of the madness of the half-time analysis with Kieran Whelan and Joe Brolly, defending sending off. Joe Brolly was claiming it should have been a free out when the television pictures could show you clearly to the million people or so who were watching. And Micheál kind of goes, part of the build-up was this pressure that had been put on David Goff emanating from places down south, an Eamon Fitzmaurice comment, and just saying that, you have an analyst making a lot of bad calls in a game of hot air, calling out a referee in a far more pressurised game who is calling everything right. So even when Goff is getting arguably the hardest calls right, he's getting lambasted in front of a million people.
Yeah.
So imagine he actually got a serious call wrong. So no, he does. He kind of cuts through it. And to me, he mentions the Sky thing, and I suppose to me there's the irony, like, Joe, he's on form, he's again very analytical, he has that legal brain, but for someone who's defended RTE and kind of criticised Sky Deal, he's almost like an advertisement for Sky, because people were online, you could see the reactions switch over, like Sky were covering the game and their level of analysis was very clear, impartial, even from Sen and Colin, who, as Micheál points out, is not just a former player, he's a fellow Nafina clubman at Cooper's, and said that the red card was deserved. So, this again, punditry analysis, Sky have their critics, and there's the whole debate about terrestrial TV, which is another thing, but in terms of their analysis, they called it on the day and seemed to get it far right than RTE did.
I'd be fascinated to know about RTE's response. My suspicion is they're delighted with all this. I think it's part.
I don't think so, Pierre. And I heard to the contrary, and it'll be interesting to see what the live panel will be for the replay. So, but just again linked to Kieran Whelan, we were talking on air before about punditry, and this idea story during the week came out about should pundits be neutral in the Examiner, and like Declan Bennett said no. But if you can't trust the pundit to give an impartial view, well then, like Kieran Whelan again, Kieran established his reputation as being very clear, even when Dublin were involved, but like Joanne was showing him the live footage of Johnny Cooper's arm being pulled to the ground, pulling David Clifford to the ground, and he wouldn't admit that. So I think the lads know that whether it was being caught up in the Dublin Kerry thing or different agendas, but it didn't, people were seeing didn't align with the facts. And I suppose you get to Joe's defence, he put his hand up and said, I got it wrong.
Yeah, and as he said in his column, I'll read out some of it here. He says he phoned up David Goff and contacted and said it was unfair of him to criticise a man of his integrity and honour. He says, as always with David, it was the most entertaining and fascinating conversation. How did you get the penalty so wrong, I asked him. It was minimal contact for a split second. After he had stopped laughing, he said, watch it carefully, Joe, you bollocks. It's right, but the contact was only very brief, but by doing what he did, Johnny subtly moved David out of position. He kind of just explains the call, essentially. I watched it again after we spoke, and goddammit, David is right. It's a penalty, subtle but clear. And then he goes on, he played you for the second yellow. And more laughter from David Goff. He clearly body checks and arm checks Cooper off the ball. Clear free out for the Cooper pull down. You're right, but you're wrong, Joe. He said David did play him, he did check him with his arm, but that's not a foul. And explains you need to look it up in the rules. Joe looks it up, and there it is. He found it. And he says, no, checking an opponent in those circumstances is fine. So although David plays him, the first foul occurs when Johnny grabs his arm. he goes, put it like that, it's absolutely true. So there you have it, every day is a school day. He kind of, on that one, it almost feels like he's kind of saying, yeah, he was right, I'm still not 100% convinced.
Yeah, he didn't give him
it seems definitely on the penalty, he seems fairly convinced by it. I think with the second yellow card, he's kind of going.
But part of the problem is, again, people who've been following, would read Joe and know the subtext. Again, he's attached himself to Dublin and kind of, has been made it clear multiple times that he is a massive fan of this Dublin team. And the problem I guess people had is that, his reaction just seemed to fit his agenda and his bias towards Dublin in terms of. So I guess that was part of the problem, that, it's fine to say that they're great, but if you're almost coming across like Kieran Whelan, that you're back in the team you want, well, that's not, the reaction online showed you immediately that isn't what people were thinking.
And by attaching, excuse my ignorance, but by attaching himself to Dublin, do you suspect that this is a deliberate attempt to go for the unpopular option?
Well, no, I don't know.
It would be.
Well, it's against, Joe's a contrarian. So when Jim McGuinness came along, he, again, was a huge fan of McGuinness and so much to admire it. But when he turned, the anti-Donegal and McGuinness stuff, which he goes at regularly, is so clear. So he's a fan of Dublin, and Dublin, this idea that they're unpopular either, they've a huge following, and I know plenty who, many counties, were looking to see Kerry bet. So this idea that, there's plenty, Kerry have won plenty of titles as well. So it's just, we're talking about punditry and, again, people where it feeds into their analysis, like can the Gary Nevilles of this world keep their Man U bias, and where does it fit in? But I think on the big occasions like that, you're still looking for objective, unbiased opinion, So, or at least, particularly when the footage is, I would thought, unequivocal. So it will be interesting, I think, to see the panel and the reaction the next day.
Is it down to, because I think Micheál makes a really good, just one little paragraph in his piece, but just the stock we all place in punditry of all sports, like he's saying, talking about his time. In a London alehouse, we once witnessed a debate that threatened to become something more physical, as an Irishman asserted his national pride when arguing with a Cockney chap that RTE's soccer panel was better than the BBC's and ITV's put together.
But there is this, I don't know, Peter, the debate with punditry about moving beyond the opinion to the analysis and the science-based stuff, and what Sky have done and Gary Neville does. There is this constant friction now, but it's just opinion. It's it's not enough anymore, and so there is that balance, and you can see it here with the fight between Sky's approach and RTE's, which is again maybe more opinionated and less afraid to go for sacred cows, and obviously people want a bit of both.
Any other bits in terms of Gaelic games? All Ireland football final replay. There was I think there was an interesting piece with Darragh Canada, going through, I suppose, the just kind of the nature of an All Ireland final replay, which he played in 2000 when Kerry beat Galway in their replay, and just how everything is so strange down to the night of the drawn game itself, when you're at this banquet and there are sponsors that have to be entertained, who have laid on this thing for them, and there's wine there that has to be drunk but isn't being drunk. And
he mentions that line, Neil. The Kerry group have booked a hotel, they've paid for 400 meals, there's wine there but no one drinking it, and it's the strangest, most surreal of atmospheres. So Darragh, he gave just a very good insight into the problem, how different replays are, maybe an insight into what Kerry and Dublin players will be going through for the replay, and even down to himself for his first All-Ireland final. He said, I couldn't sleep and played poorly. So the different things that happened, and he said the tactical differences, the nuances between now and then. He said their big thing was to swap two of the lads, Tomas O'Shea and Colin Sullivan. He said that was the big thing for the replay.
Back to the envelope.
Whereas now, clearly, you probably need a dossier on kick-outs, the opposition. The lads will have being bunkered with video analysis of each of the players. And I was reading Kieran Deely yesterday talking about how they'll have uploaded the footage onto the huddle system and broken it down for the different players. So the idea that
swap a couple of defenders
two
around.
boys would be grand, and that's
and it works. They won the replay. But also as well, I thought was interesting. Even I don't know, am I showing my youth here maybe or something? But he's talking about the old tradition of how the two teams used to meet the following afternoon for lunch. The day after the drawing game.
Day after draw.
On the Monday afternoon, the two teams met again in the Burlington Hotel, but this time to share bread rather than a result. It was GA tradition that a post-final luncheon involving two teams was held the day after, but it was an occasion which only one team ever would have had an appetite for. With the replay already on their minds, this time both teams might as well have been chewing cardboard. It's
like having mass maybe the day after, the two teams together. It's an incredible idea, all right, yeah.
I think he says it was scrapped around 2002 or 3 or something like that.
Yeah, they realised how ridiculous it was. But there was, again, just another line about how teams react to the replay or what brings them together, and just the fact that he felt that it was something off the field that was critical. He said, I remember between the replay, Eddie Tatler O'Sullivan, who was a selector with us, lost his brother Buddy, and we all went to the funeral. And he says, it sounds kind of cliched, but it's brought us all together in a different place, and I really think we bonded strongly between the two games. So just that intangible that people talk about, well, how are they going to handle kick-out strategies and what tactical thing? But Dara says, obviously, a team bonding or a mood or a vibe between a team can be just as important.
Yeah, I think hats off to the GAA writers, because if you consider that the game itself was picked apart at the start of the week, and they've got 2 weeks to fill, if you like, and there's no media access from what I'm told.
No.
So yesterday I read Malachy Clerkin in the Irish Times talking about the whole psychology of the replay. As he says, it's there in the calendar, but it's written in invisible ink. It doesn't exist, and then suddenly it's the only thing that exists.
Yeah.
So he talks to Brian Hogan. And he manages not to mention or write the word Dublin until 5 paragraphs from the end of a 40-paragraph piece, which I thought was brilliant, because there's as I said, so many analysis pieces about the game itself. So it's tough.
And in fairness on that, just for to get into the real numbers, and that Mick Foley is a very good piece, just looking at Fenton, how Kerry have coped with him and his number of possessions now. He had the last day as low as 16 compared to what he normally have, and how David Moran, Fenton had averaged around 27s possession per championship. So just this kind of boring into the detail of far beyond he didn't play well, or exactly what he did with the ball. Chrissy O'Connor the same, going through just literally
stuff,
the stats based, to just put the flesh on the bones of exactly why didn't it happen for Fenton, or how did Kerry get on it. So like I said, there is this real mix, and it feeds into the the kind of Brawley versus Neville, or whatever way you split it into, where the coverage is going and what's the what the people want.
Is that the first thing you kind of think of when you get a big replay where you're going, how do we sell this one again?
I think people are looking at the holidays they booked, the time off, the various plans.
10 days ago we did a big All-Ireland football Drive for Five special, a 17-hour broadcast with various things. We're not going to be doing it again this coming Thursday.
We were all looking for a different angle, and even that weekend I found we were trying to come up with something different. I said, oh look, we'll go for somebody, and I said, well look, maybe Pádraig Harrington from the golf and his Dublin.
Yeah, Joe was mentioning that on the pay-per-view last week.
Spoke to Harrington. He was brilliant, but like for 48 minutes he's in Switzerland the day before he's competing, and kind of talks away, but he was fascinating, just again for something different, as from a top guy, about what it takes at the highest level, and the fact that he'd been inside the circle with Jim Gavin. But like I say, we all after this week, everyone kind of went, oh look, every person related to Kerry in Dublin in some way had been talked to.
It shouldn't be a shock though, because our replays have become the norm almost.
Yeah.
In hurling anyway, there was a few, 13 or 12, 13 and 14, wasn't it?
It went for so long without one, and then they all came along. So again, I think the one good thing about the replay is everybody has a body of work to analyse. So the build-up is just preview, and we're all imagining what might happen. So I think there still is a lot of good stuff in the papers today, analysing more from the halftime to the boring into the heavy detail.
In terms of the Camogie finals today, there was a piece here in the Sunday Independent, and their Camogie wraparound today that you were mentioning. It's with the Camogie Association CEO, Sinead McNulty. Philip.
Yeah, I'm heading over there in a bit just to cover the senior final as well. In fairness, the Sunday Indo give it its own pull-out, give it very good coverage as it has in previous years, and actually know Sinead just growing up, and it's typical of the different pathways. One interesting fact about her story, she only took up Gaelic football when she was 24 and kind of got interested. So there's so much debate about the drop-off in sport and different sports. But here you have someone who's now CEO, the Camogie Association, who has come into it late and obviously driven things on. And a few very interesting lines about just with women's sport, the 2020 campaign, but how in her previous role she used to talk about Title IX in college, about discrimination for women's sport. So, you know, there's today's final, the big debate is about what kind of a spectacle we'll get, and camogie, kind of like Gaelic football nearly for the last 10 years, is kind of this constant wrestling with its conscience about what direction it wants to take. And camogie at the moment there's a debate over, increasing the physicality, changing the tackle, but to me there's a couple of obvious ones, like dropping a hurley when they play a hand pass, and like in hurling it's actually a free against you. I just think it even looks awful, and the hand pass goal in hurling went out with Johnny Flaherty in the 81 All-Ireland. So there's a couple of things aesthetically I think would clean up, would help. And then tactically they've moved with the times with sweepers, and Cork Kilkenny the last number of years were very tight tactical affairs with not much for the neutral. So the question is whether Kilkenny-Galway will be a bit more of a spectacle.
Yeah, well, I notice Dennis Waters talking about the fact that the rules have to kind of catch up with all the strength and conditioning stuff that goes on. So they have the impression that these women are built to be competitive physically.
Yeah, they're doing all this. They're doing all this strength and conditioning work, and they're essentially pretty much not being allowed to use it because of the sheer lack of physical contact that's allowed in the game. And I think it was pointed out by Kilkenny's joint captain Megan Farrell here with Murray Crowe in the Sunday Independent as well, just talking about how I'd like to see the use of the shoulder come in. In training, we do strength and conditioning for 2 or 3 months, but what's the point if you're not allowed to use your strength? The game is changing, and so should the rules. If they want people to support us, they'll have to change things, because people won't want to watch a match that just has loads of frees. And I think it's a really valid point.
Yeah. I'm not sure even if the increased physicality would help as a spectacle. We've seen it in hurling, like tactically when you get into that sweeper and extra defender.
But would it just stop the stop-start, the whistle blowing constantly?
Well, it hasn't. It hasn't really. In hurling, you end up with so much more collisions. That's what hurling in the last 2 or 3 years has turned into, a collision-based game, which it never was. So I think watching last year's final, if the increased physicality, I don't think it would have improved it hugely as a spectacle. To me, the part of it is that coaches are ahead of the game, so they've introduced defensive systems, and unlike the men's game where maybe lads are driving the ball over 100, from 100 metres, a lot of the plays focused in that middle third, and the puckouts aren't dropping as far, so it actually becomes more congested. So the coaches are ahead of the game, so maybe other rule changes would help. I think Gaelic football went through that. I think simple defensive changes, or where you have to leave a certain number of players up the field, would help all that. Maybe you don't need to change the physical element.
We're running out of time. We have a few minutes left, though. Is there any one last piece that someone wants to point out?
Well, I really enjoyed Dermot Gillese's interview with Paul Dunn, just because I hadn't read an interview with Paul Dunn before. He always struck me as kind of inscrutable individual. You make these judgments on people just from watching them play golf, and you think, oh, I know what this guy's like. So subconsciously you do anyway. But he never struck me as being particularly outgoing, quite a quiet-looking fella. But some of the quotes were fascinating. He's talking about his relationship with the other Irish golfers. He's going through a bit of a slump at the moment. He's 6 missed cuts in the last 7 events. But he doesn't sound like somebody who's particularly worried about that. But first of all, he talks about watching Larry up in Portrush. He says his tee shot at 16, which was calamity, the par 3. I know he has a big lead, 6 strokes at that stage, but the wind is in off the left and it's raining, and he's hitting a 3-iron nonchalantly into the middle of the green. Fantastic. He says they were watching, he was on holiday in Spain with his girlfriend that week, and that their relationship was under considerable pressure because Dunn was following Larry, his progress on his mobile phone. But Scalise gets some good stuff out, some good opinions out of him, and he says at the end, he says, while it doesn't change the challenge of coping with bad times, there's a comfort in understanding that I have what it takes to do great things. It makes them more acceptable, the knocks, in other words. That's probably the biggest thing that's happened to me in the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And just on, related to that, the one piece, it jumped out for me as well, Mark Aller, talk about the knocks, a very interesting interview with Sunita Puspur.
Oh, yes.
After becoming world champion, and how, she thought of her sister who'd passed away from cancer earlier this year, and just some incredible detail again, it tied into the same thing that Peter was talking about there, about how she was ill and how she was visiting her sister. I went over for a few days, she says, but stayed for a little bit more. I was in Latvia for 3 weeks, and she passed away at the same time as the World Cup was on. It was scary because I had very mixed emotions. I thought I should be at home training, but at the same time I wanted to spend some quality time with my sister because I knew she was going to pass away soon. So really heavy stuff going on, and the fact that she was able to handle all that.
Yeah, all of the pressures that are on the individual athlete, and the fact that how much she relies on her husband, for example, to cook for her and to do things for her, so that she can put the time into training.
But the car.
That was the big one. Yeah, she was coming back from, was it this week when she was coming back from the Rowing World Championships, or it might have been the European Championships, one of those big events anyway, and she comes back, she's the world champion, and she gets into her car in the airport and it doesn't start.
It wouldn't start, yeah. And again, it says Casper has the main family car. So this idea, the sacrifice, the private lives that are going beyond the sports field.
She's no fool. So here's my opportunity to make sure
some sponsor get on board there. That's probably where I'll leave it today, guys. Thanks a million for coming in. Philip Lanigan, you'll be at Croke Park next Saturday evening?
Yeah, absolutely, can't wait. And I don't know what calling it now is probably a hard thing, but no, it should be great. And I think
you've opened the door there, Philip. You're going to have to give us a read. Come on.
I think like the drawn game, Dublin are going to win and make history. But I think Kerry, there's a lot of buoyant Kerry fans after last week, so.
And Peter, you're bound for the Far East.
Yeah.
This day next week, you said, is it? Or?
Yeah, flying out this day next week. Yeah, I'm very, very fortunate to be sent to Japan to cover Ireland at the World Cup.
If you're going to predict at this moment in time when you're returning to Ireland, I mean, I know it's open ended at the moment, but do you have a gut feeling when you'll be back in the country?
Well, yeah, I think we're going to struggle to get past South Africa in the quarterfinal, if that's how it works out, which is kind of the way it's, I suppose, shaped to go according to the current rankings. Although, of course, according to the current rankings, we're going to win the World Cup.
Yeah.
But even before Ireland started, winning Grand Slams and beating New Zealand, I would have questioned their ability to play the type of game that they play successfully for 7 weeks in a row. And also while Ireland have dipped slightly, South Africa have stepped forward significantly, and I can see them making it to a final I can see England doing very well at the World Cup also. So I think it's going to be tough, but I quite like, for once, Ireland going to a World Cup with the expectation not that high. It's not a very scientific way of looking at a rugby tournament, but just in terms of the way Irish teams perform, having low expectations is probably a good thing.
All right, we'll leave it there. So, guys, thanks a million for coming in and joining us. That's it for the Sunday Paper Review this week. We'll be back for more, though. We're with you right up until 7 o'clock this evening. We're back after the break.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
This September, the Moncrief Show will be bringing you a first-class entertainment experience as we broadcast live from the 3 Arena. On Friday, the 13th of September, we'll be broadcasting a very special Movies and Booze with thanks to Lidl from the 1878 private members bar at the 3 Arena. Come and listen to excellent music, taste delicious wine and eat wonderful food at one of the music hubs of Dublin. If you'd like to come along to be part of the audience, then just go to newstalk.com/events to register. Be fast though, as tickets go quick.
Movies and Booze on Moncrief.
Brought to you by Lidl's award-winning wine range.
Every Friday on Newstalk.
Satisfying afternoons with Harvey Norman. First-time buyer? Wondering how to get everything done? Don't. Just sit back and watch your house become a home with Harvey Norman's delivery and install.
Go, Harvey, go! Movie buffs and sports fans are about to clash because the sale that stacks up is back. Switch to Virgin Media and get superfast broadband and TV with Virgin Media Sport, and now with the choice of Sky Sports or Sky Cinema. All for an awesome €55 a month for 12 months. The sale that stacks up. Now on. See virginmedia.ie.
T's and C's apply. See virginmedia.ie. New customers only. 12-month contract. Offer ends 2nd of October 2019.
What is autumn's soundtrack? It doesn't bang. It's soft and wistful. It's all about change and moving on, and it's beautiful. But even in autumn, some things don't change. Irish emergency and hospital services need a stable, regular supply of blood throughout the year. Unfortunately, the rate of donation often falls as we focus on the changes from our summer to autumn routines.